Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Outgrow's Marketer of the Month. I'm your host, Dr. Saksham Sharda. I'm the creative director at outgrow.co. And for this month, we're going to interview Kevin Indig, who is the director of SEO at Shopify. Thanks for joining us, Kevin.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So we're going to start with a rapid fire round just to break the ice. You get 3 passes. In case you don't want to answer a question, you can just say pass. But try to keep your answers to 1 word or 1 sentence only, okay?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right. So the first one, how long does it take you to get ready in the mornings?
10 minutes.
Okay. Most embarrassing moment of your life?
Sending an email to the wrong customer with sensitive data.
Okay. How many hours of sleep can you survive on?
7.
Okay, fill in the blank. An upcoming SEO trend is blank. Beep. Okay, we're gonna have to skip the city in which the
best one, yeah.
Okay, the city in which the best kiss of your life happened.
Rome.
Okay, pick one: Mark Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey.
Zuckerberg.
Okay, the first movie that comes to your mind when I say the word ambition.
It's called The Social Network, the Zuckerberg film.
Okay, yeah, The Social Network, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, why did you last cry? Sorry, when did you last cry and why?
God. When I watched the Schindler's List movie, that always makes me cry.
Same. All right, okay, next. The biggest mistake of your career?
Is yet to come.
All right, how do you relax?
Reading a good book.
Okay. How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
2.
Mm-hmm. A habit of yours that you really hate?
Being very deliberate with working out all the time. I think that's something I rarely hate.
Okay. The most valuable skill you've learned in life?
Critical thinking.
Mm-hmm. And finally, the last question. Your favorite Netflix show?
House of Cards.
Okay. All right, well, that was the end of the rapid fire round. You passed 1 question, so you scored 9 on 10, but that's good.
Yeah, those are good questions.
All right, so now we're going to go on to the bigger questions. The first one is, you joined Shopify recently as the SEO director. What does a day at Shopify look like?
It's a very good question. It depends a little bit on the day. We have 1 meeting-free day in the week, for example. So there's 1 very productive day. But usually, for me personally, and this is probably a bit different compared to most other people at Shopify, but for me, there are lots of meetings in the day. So I would say I spend probably 80, maybe 90% of my time in meetings with others. And then around that, I try to focus on the top priority items and get some work done. So me personally, I get up around 6:30ish in the morning, start working around 7:30, start the first
Working
meeting
or
around
working
9.
out?
We're just working, yeah. Working out comes later, usually. Sometimes I work on the morning, but usually the afternoon.
Just clarifying.
And then,
Okay,
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, it's important. And then,
So you're saying,
we
yeah, then ahead. Mm-hmm.
jump in the first meeting around 9 Central Time, finishing the last around 4 to 5, and then comes working out.
Okay. And then your day ends at around... Okay, it ends at 5 p.m., then you work out. And how long do you work out for?
It depends on where I am in my program, usually 1 to 2 hours. And then I often put in another hour of work, sometimes 2 at night. Depends on how much there is to do that day.
And so you're saying you're just going from back to back, from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting 80% of your time at work.
Yeah, except for this one meeting free day, which is a blessing, I have to say. And that's where I can really focus on getting a lot of stuff done. But yeah, as a director, most of my time is really spent in directing, aligning, communicating, those kind of things, and then
Mm.
most of the work is pretty much done by the team.
Okay. All right. So, how can one create a high converting sales funnel? Like, give us one trick or tip for creating a high converting sales funnel with the help of SEO.
It comes back to intent, and I don't mean that in the idea of user intent. I mean that more in the idea of what intent or how strong is the intent expressed in your keyword. When somebody Googles for buy living room lamp, that is a very strong intent, right? When somebody just Googles living room lamp, that's a
Mm,
very low intent because you're not sure, are they comparing, are they just trying to understand the different lamps that are out there. So
mm,
starting focusing the funnel, like when you want to build it from the ground up, you want to focus on high intent keywords and then add more at the top. And most people build their funnels in reverse. They focus on the top of the funnel on trying to go after keywords with a very high search volume. But it's a little bit leaky, in the funnel analogy, because you're not exactly sure if all the people you target with those high search volume keywords will actually convert at the end.
mm. Interesting. And why do you think SEO split testing is so valuable these days?
That's a good question. I'm a huge proponent of testing in general in SEO, whether that's split testing or before and after or diff and diff tests. There are many different testing frameworks, and it's a bit counterintuitive because for an actual statistically relevant test, you need a randomized sample, and that's not possible for SEO because we really just have one kind of mandate or one kind of target audience, which is Googlebot. So we have to run quasi experiments, which are still valid and helpful, right? But they're not the same as most A/B testing out there. And I think it's super important because SEO and search has become so complex and competitive that we cannot assume anymore that we know exactly what will work. We have to test most things from the ground up. And the way that I explain this to myself is that we have a high level map of things that will probably work. We know content is important, links, user experience now with Core Web Vitals, but we don't know how important, and we don't know what all the other factors are that might impact organic search rankings or organic search traffic. So we have to adopt this testing mindset, or as I call it, a zero-based SEO mindset. And this idea comes from the approach of zero-based budgeting, where instead of saying, okay, this is the budget you had last year, so you get the same this year, you say, what are you going to do this year? What do you need this year? And we can transfer that same idea to SEO, where we say, okay, let's test everything from the ground up, right? Like from scratch. Let's have a completely open mindset, instead of strong opinions and thinking that we know exactly what's going to work.
Hmm. Yeah, that totally was, because the next question literally was, how do you deal with how short term the rules of SEO are? Like, how do you keep your knowledge up to date?
Yeah, I think a big part of that is building a corpus, a body of experiments, and that's one of the few things that I I would have loved to start sooner in my career. I only started this a couple years ago, but I think every SEO these days needs to build out a body of experiments, where they actually test assumptions, right? Where they really develop a strong like a degree of practical experience that they then keep and then apply moving forward, instead of reading something on the internet and then applying that. Now the thing is that, as long as we have solid experiments and we publish those as case studies, it's totally fine to use that as a basis for your next experiment. It's actually
Hmm.
something that's called Bayesian experimentation or Bayesian thinking. It's very, very powerful. But generally, I think that the best way to learn is to learn from practice in SEO. It's a very, very applied science in my mind, or art, if you will. And yeah, we need to try things. We need to observe, trial and error. I think these are the most powerful. And then, of course, you want to spend a bit of time reading online what others are doing, what others are seeing. That is still valid and important. But I think in the last couple of years, as Google has introduced more machine learning into search, one of the biggest shifts, and maybe one of the biggest trends, that would have been a good answer to the question before, is that we should index less on reading what others are doing online and index more on our own practical experience and what we observe ourselves.
And what role do you think keywords play when you're trying to scale up in terms of SEO?
Well, I think there's still an atomic unit in SEO, right? So that we cannot completely disregard them. But one of the bigger realizations for me over the last 12 months is that they need to funnel up to the same user intent. So to take a step back, a couple of years ago, I wrote this article about how keywords are on the decline and that everything now goes toward topics, right? So that instead of thinking in keywords, we should think in topics. Every keyword that falls in a specific topic is almost the same, right? So we don't have to target a keyword 100%, but instead we should target topics. And I think that idea doesn't. I think I updated my understanding of that, and now I think it's about user intent. So keywords help us express user intent, but we need to understand that they all funnel up to an expression of intent. So when somebody looks for something like what to do in Chicago, for example, that is basically the same as things to do in Chicago. What can I do in Chicago? The best things to do in Chicago. Like this all expresses the same intent. And that's how I think about creating content these days. Keywords help me, but I create content to address user intent, which then allows me to rank for many keywords, sometimes even thousands.
And how do you size the potential of your traffic through SEO then?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think the best way is actually when you already rank for the keyword, and you get an impression count in Google Search Console. That is the easiest, right? Like, say, for example, you're on the first page, but you rank number 10 or 9, and then you see how many impressions you get, and you can extrapolate that up to position 1. That's the most accurate way. The other way, if you don't rank on page 2, right, like very often you just don't because you're not even ranking for the keyword, or you rank on page 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. So if that's not the case, then we have to work with some abstraction of search volume. So you can use any third-party rank tracker, get the search volume, or you take it straight from Keyword Planner. And then I think it's important to build your own custom click curve. So you take your keywords and you aggregate the average click-through rate per position that you saw in your Google Search Console account. And then you multiply that with the search volume of the keyword. And then I think like a third thing to put on top that's very important is that when you get closer to this number 1 spot in ranking, you update these search volumes with impressions, because impressions are that's a true search demand. Search volume is very flawed. It's a very we can go on for hours about why it's a subpar metric, right? But it's not a good representation of how much traffic you can actually get. So I think a third and most overlooked step is to make sure you update your search volumes with impressions as soon as you rank on page number 1.
So considering all this, how does one forecast SEO? Like, how can one calculate the return on their SEO activities?
Yeah, such a good question. So we already spoke about, scoping out the traffic potential. So you want to build your click curve. You want to multiply that with your search volume or impressions, whatever you have at hand. That gives you the maximum achievable search traffic. From there, you want to come up with 3 different scenarios. I'm a big fan of a conservative scenario, a neutral, and an optimistic scenario. So the optimistic one would be to say, okay, I capture the total addressable search volume per keyword, right? What we talked about earlier, like what could I get if I rank number 1? The neutral forecast would be what could I get if I rank on position 3 to 5, and then the conservative would be what can I get if I rank on position 6 to 10. That gives me a range to work with. And then lastly, you want to think about what do you actually do to get there, right? So there has to be a connection between the optimizations you make or the projects you ship and how you get that search traffic. And the last step is to then extrapolate that over time, right? So, say you plan the year ahead, you know that your total addressable search traffic is, say, 1 million clicks over that whole year. Now, you need to divide that up into the different months, and then you need to weigh that based on when you ship optimizations. So, of course, in January, you probably won't get anything if you don't ship anything, right? But let's say you optimize all the titles in February, right? Then you want to think about, okay, how much will that do for me to get closer to my total achievable organic search traffic, right? And then what else do I do across the rest of the year? And then you can make assumptions and roughly forecast how much traffic you get across the year in relation to your total addressable search traffic.
And what do you think is, okay, all right, give us one effective strategy for B2B content marketing for SEO.
I think there are several. I think it also depends a little bit on your niche, but generally, I think like collecting from your product data that only you have, and telling a story around that is still one of the most powerful things that you can do. A couple of examples. I think there was CrowdStrike, who recently published a microsite around the biggest hacks and internet attacks out there, and how severe they were, how the hackers proceeded, and they gave each hacker like their own avatar and their own name, and they made it like almost like a set of villains, and it was just super sexy, easy to link to, very informative. And I think that's something that's almost like a best practice in terms of content marketing, especially for B2B and for B2B SaaS. So I want to see what data do I have access to. What is the story that I can tell about this data? How can I make this, very appealing and very accessible? And then, is there an emotion that I can evoke in people, right? I think that's like the bridge from data to emotions is not very obvious. It's not something that you intuitively would do or think about. And so I think if you can, as content marketers, we are in the position to build that bridge, right? I think that's one of our main responsibilities. And if you're able to build a strong bridge, then backlinks take care of themselves, publicity takes care of itself, brand traffic takes care of itself. But it's not easy. It takes time, it takes resources. You need to be able to get the data, you need to be able to reliably aggregate and process the data. That can be challenging at times. So I think a lot more of that of a tip that I'm trying to give here is really around how to get the data and how to work with the data, instead of how to then write about it, or kind of what titles to use. So the tip that I can give you is look at your database, try to get access, try to work with a data scientist on working with the data, which you can, by the way, outsource to some degree. And then I think data is 90% of a good content marketing campaign. And I think the other 10% are the writing and promotion, all that kind of stuff. But if you get the data right, then all the other stuff will take care of itself.
Fair. And now to a lighter topic, which is, how do you take time out for your own website, writing blogs and podcasting along with a full-time job, or is it 2 full-time jobs that you have? What motivates you to do that?
Yeah, it's funny. So I have this newsletter, and I've been writing for just myself to clarify my thoughts, to take notes for a long time. And a couple of years ago, I was like, hey, why don't I put this online? I'm basically writing articles for myself almost. Like, I might as well put this online to share with others. And then I did that, and it was pretty well received. And then the same thing happened with my podcast. I went to lots of conferences. I met lots of very smart people, and like sometimes you get into this amazing conference where you hit it off, you geek out, and you're energized. You're like, man, I got so many ideas, and I'm so inspired right now. And I always found it sad that I couldn't record this for others to participate in it. And that's how my podcast started. So of course now with Corona, I cannot meet in person anymore. So all my interviews are online. You see that all the early episodes of my podcast are all in person. They're all recorded in person, like with me meeting with that person face to face and basically more or less just hitting it off. And that's something that I wanted to bring to an experience that others can participate in. So I think, my motivation is much more, it's much more intrinsic. I mean, it's cool when I love that, I have lots of newsletter subscribers and podcast subscribers and listeners and stuff. That's all amazing, and I love that I can give back to a degree. But to be honest, a lot of that were things that I already did for myself, and I thought it would probably be a shame not to share that or to record that. And that's my main motivation. It does take some time. I do
Mm.
outsource a lot of the production and editing, and I have dedicated time every week for myself to write a blog article. And over time, you get faster and better. So now the articles that I write, it takes me about 2-ish hours, depending on the topic. Sometimes it takes me half an hour because I know exactly what I want to write. And sometimes it takes me 4 hours because I'm struggling to get to do all the research and get the topic together. So I put some time aside during the week and on the weekend. And to me, writing is it's very refreshing and energizing because I can clarify my thoughts. I can delve into a topic, and these are all things that are refreshing to me. So it's not as much of a chore as it might seem from the outside.
Fair. Do you think it's that the future of marketing and like everything is moving towards everyone building a persona around themselves, like a marketing persona? Like I imagine people like Rand Fishkin or like others. Do you think is that what we're moving towards, where we expect everyone to be publishing blogs just for themselves, expressing their thoughts?
I think it's I think it fits very well into the overall zeitgeist, right? I think we're now
Mm,
living in the age of the creator, where
mm,
even yesterday at Apple's event, they announced that they will provide creators the option to charge money for their podcast. And I think this is just another kind of drop in the bucket of something that has been brewing for a couple of years now, which is that the um the middlemen, um between creators and their audiences are being cut out more and more. You see the same in
mm,
music, we see the same in blogging, in YouTubing and everything, right? Basically, people are going direct to consumer, if you want to talk in e-commerce terms, right? Everybody can build a direct relationship with their audience, charge for whatever they create or provide, and make a good living off of that. And so I think building a personal brand these days is a smart thing to do. I think it's very painful when you don't have something to say, when you don't enjoy it, right? So
mm,
um, there's certainly something to be said for people finding their medium. So I think writing, for example, it comes easier to me than podcasting or YouTubing, simply because I can express my thoughts better. And I feel like I can revise and edit, right, where audio and YouTube is a bit more in the moment, even though you can edit there as well, but it comes with a different quality.
mm,
And so I think everybody needs to find their medium. I think people should only do it if they enjoy it, right? Like you shouldn't try to fake it. But if you do, then I don't see a reason why not to do it. I think it comes with major benefits these days, whether it's increasing your market value. Like people who have a voice out there, even when they work for other companies, they might attract um, new talent because I have a strong voice. That's easier for me, for example, now recruiting for Shopify, because I have a bit of a following, much huge
mm,
superpower. Or if you want to write a book and sell it, or create a course and sell it, or just charge directly for the material you create. I think it's very attractive. There are great reasons to create a personal brand if you enjoyed it, if you have something to say.
mm. I was going to say, whose personal brands, like, could you give us example of personal brands that you like, people in your field who you admire, and who can engage in debates publicly that you admire?
Yeah. I think there are quite a lot of people. Um, across various fields. I think like Tim Ferriss, for example, is a person
Mm,
who I admire greatly and what he has built for himself. There's like Jay Akanzo, I think does a really good job. Brian Dean, Dan Barker is really great, and then Ryan Holiday is a person that I've always been looking up to. Ben Thompson, certainly, even though he's certainly not a marketer, right? He's more an analyst, but what he has built with his newsletter is absolutely outstanding. And then even investors like Brett Feld or Jason Kalkanis have done an absolutely fantastic job in building their platforms. I don't even think it's necessary to, I think it's more for the fun of it, to be honest, for certain people. So it's less of a strategic business moves. They made a lot of money, right? Like they don't need to make money with that. There are probably different motivations to do that, and I respect that.
Fair. All right. So the last question is, what would you be doing if not SEO?
I think I
Like,
would
if
be a
not this
writer.
whole field.
Yeah,
Okay.
probably a writer. It's interesting because either a writer or an entrepreneur. To be honest, I think I would
Mm,
potentially also start my own company. But say let's say it wasn't anything in the digital space, anything in
mm,
the online world, then I would probably be a writer.
mm. And so do you think, well, I suppose this is a bit of a odd question. Do you think the role of the writer has shifted to the digital space? Do you think historically we've moved there? Because more and more it does seem, and many people would not agree with me, but I do think that writing a novel is something that's become outdated now. Uh, there's other forms of media that the world is more interested in.
I think it depends. I think book sales are still there's still books that sell millions of copies. People still buy
Mm,
books. I think it's less of a mass medium anymore, but I think you can
mm.
still. Yeah, I think as a writer, it was always a bit of a gamble, and I would probably write more nonfiction, But yeah, it's similar to like becoming an actor, right? Like who becomes a well published writer? It's really hard. However, I think
Fair.
also that I think writing is more a tool. It's more of a means than an end, right? I think this claim that writing is thinking that really
Mm,
that changed how I think about a lot of things. And so I think it's less about just the sheer act of writing. I think it's more the act of finding ideas, putting them together, synthesizing them, communicating them, teaching them, making them understandable, and
mm.
bringing something really valuable out into the world, more so than the sheer act of writing. I think that's why I enjoy writing so much. It's less because of the sheer craft. It's more that it allows me to transplant my thoughts into somebody else's head, and I find that absolutely fascinating.
You are technically then being a writer every time you put this goal on yourself that you're going to publish a blog every week, as you said earlier on this podcast. So that makes you a writer, though.
Yeah, that definitely makes me a writer, no doubt. And it's a vehicle for me to share my experience day to day, week to week, or my observations
Mm,
with other people. And it's funny with writing. The little side note is that it I used to write 3 articles a week, not before I joined Shopify. And now looking back, I'm like, how the hell was I able to do that? But you really rise to the occasion. So me setting this goal to write 1 email per week, which I've been doing now for I think 1 or 2 years, it's really not as crazy as it might seem, but it
mm,
has kind of helped my understanding tenfold. And the cool thing is also you get good feedback from people. So whenever I publish to the almost 5,000 subscribers that I have, there will always be 2 or 3 people who may be back and are like, you know what, you left out this piece in your idea
mm,
here, or have you considered that, or this is what I have observed. So it's such a nice way to get smarter faster, or to improve your understanding at a faster rate than others, because you get live feedback, you get in conversation about your writing, and that's another piece that I highly enjoy.
And what about, I'm sorry, I keep thinking of questions, but
It's
what
fine.
about the whole thing about, when you create a brand around yourself as a person, it's also easy for you as a person to be cancelled, to be like, if you say something too controversial because you're putting yourself out there. So how do you deal with that if in case you venture into those territories where you are questioning, I guess, complicated ideas?
Yeah, it is a real phenomenon these days. I have to say that Twitter, like, you have to, if you care a little too much about what people say about you on Twitter or your ideas, you'll get frustrated and depressed very quickly. So I guess it just comes with the territory these days, that if you put yourself out there, you put yourself at a risk that you might say things that people don't like, or you might
Mm,
say things that people disagree with. And I try to create space between my opinions and assumptions and my identity, right? I try to not take it personally, even though sometimes people make it very personal, and then that's something you have to deal with, right? But if you can step back from your assumptions and your thinking and detach it from who you are, and then have conversations about that with other people, it takes a different quality, right? And you can choose if you want to take people's claims and critique seriously or not. So I think it's an art a little bit. I think the internet makes that harder in some to some degrees. And honestly, I kind of, I don't know, like I'm not too scared about being canceled. I mean, I think it's like it's fine to a degree, because it was never just for publicity. It was never just to get a large following or for everybody to agree with me. In fact, these days I think it's almost a better sign when some people disagree with me. I think that's when I'm onto something. You know what I mean?
Mm.
That's when I know there's something there. When too many people
Uh,
agree, it's too safe. It's not bold enough. It doesn't push the whole
some
industry forward.
challenging boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Mm,
need to challenge a little bit. I think
mm,
that's important, and it's fine. And if I'll be wrong. I'm wrong about some things. I have been wrong about some things in the past, but that's when I know I'm pushing myself. If I
mm.
only stay in the safe boundaries of being right, then what am I really accomplishing? I'm just tooting my own horn, and that's not helpful for anybody.
Fair. No, yeah, that makes sense. Well, we're definitely over time, so I'm gonna call it here. Thanks everyone for joining us for this month's episode of Outgrow's Market of the Month. That was Kevin Indig, who is the Director of SEO at Shopify. Thanks for joining us, Kevin.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Really good questions. Thank you.
All right, and we'll see you once again next month.